Who carries the most blame for the missed opportunity with the Colorado Buffaloes against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets? What changes did Coach Prime and Pat Shurmur need to make before week 2 against Delaware? And should those changes include a potential shift at quarterback between Kaidon Salter and Julian Lewis? All things to come on a very Colorado Buffaloes heavy edition of the rundown today. And I'm going to put it out right off of the top. I am looking for your feedback, your thoughts, your concerns. Maybe you tell me that I'm crazy and that nothing needs to be worried about too much here. I want this to be a chance to get those thoughts and opinions and feelings off of your chest. Buffs Nation, Broncos country, college football fans alike. This is your opportunity, so fill it up in the comments and we will get to as many as we can potentially throughout the course of the show. But I want to begin with the coaching dynamic that we have here in Boulder. And when we're rewinding the clock to a handful of years ago, when Coach Prime ultimately made the decision, thanks to the diligent work of Rick George and CU's athletics and university departments, to come to Boulder in one of the more surprising coups of a coaching market in college football that we'd seen in some time, especially because this was a program that had one win in the embarrassment that was the Carl Durrell tenure and was left for dead essentially as one of, if not the worst program in, at that time, the Power 5 conferences in college football. But it happened, and it significantly changed the framework, the thought process, and the makeup of the Colorado Buffaloes football program instantly. And while it is true that from a revenue standpoint, from an eyeball standpoint, from an attention standpoint, and admissions standpoint, the Coach Prime effect in Boulder is unmistakable. It is. And it's also true, in my opinion, that a head coach at the Power 4 level in the modern era of college football does not have to be the X's and O's wizard or the offensive or defensive specialist. That does not have to be the makeup of the head coach. I think the CEO energy type archetype that Coach Prime brings as a brand ambassador, as a face of the program and all that is completely legitimate with the cards that are being dealt in today's college football. But that requires that CEO figure to be a CEO and to bring in, from a coordinator and a coaching standpoint and from a player standpoint, the people that can do and make up for the difference that CEO type figure is lacking. And that is where I think we have unveiled a pretty potentially significant problem here in Boulder. Because when you go back to last year, or really the first 2 years with Pat Shurmur and Shedeur Sanders together as a duo, there was kind of this mixed evaluation. You felt like you had a clear talent in Shedeur Sanders. Certainly didn't translate from a draft perspective. But in terms of talent at the quarterback position that CU had leading up to that, it had been a minute since you had somebody who could spin it like Shedeur did, jersey retirement worthy or not. And you had a friggin' Heisman Trophy winner in Travis Hunter who played on both sides of the ball, was all conference on both sides of the ball, and was a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, top 6, whatever it was. You don't have that anymore. And thus, I think we have discovered a lack of identity, because your identity last year and even the year before that was similar to what I think the Detroit Lions' identity was when they drafted Matthew Stafford first overall out of Georgia, and they had one of the greatest receivers in NFL history in Calvin Megatron Johnson at wide receiver. And Matthew Stafford has admitted to this in years since the two of them have parted, was there was a philosophy of, hey, Matt, just throw the ball up there and Calvin's going to bring it down. If you're under pressure, if you're under duress, your first read on every single play that's not a run play should be X. And that's kind of how it felt with Shedeur and Travis was, hey, these guys will bail us out because of the unbelievable talent that we have, and we'll just run our offense through that. They couldn't run the ball well. They had plenty of other talent, from Jimmy Horn to LaJohntay Wester to Xavier Weaver in that wide receiver room as well. But it was really Travis and Shedeur. And now that those two aren't there, there was a school of thought that I almost myself subscribed to that said, hey, they're not going to play daddy ball anymore. Pat Shurmur is actually probably going to get a chance to run an offense that is more balanced and more tailored to what he in his heart of hearts would like. And there's going to be more of a commitment to run the football. And the quarterback emphasis on the offense is not going to be focused on showcasing the son of the head coach to set him up for the NFL level. That is not at all what we got on Friday night up in Boulder against the Yellow Jackets. They seem to have no offensive identity. This was a game that program had more than half of a year to prepare for, dating back from the end of last season to now. You're talking 6, 7, 8, 9 months to prepare for this game, and that's the game plan that gets rolled out. There was no game plan. They actually ran the ball with Micah Welch and Simeon Price and DeKalen Taylor in the beginning of that game, in the first series or so, pretty damn well. And then they just inexplicably went away from it. They have all this talent in the wide receiver room, from Amarian Miller to Draylon Miller to Hakeem Williams, and just keep going down the list. They didn't even use them. Amarian Miller has one catch on one target, and it happened to be a beautiful 39-yard strike down the sideline, and he doesn't get another look? How is that the game plan going into a game? This wasn't taking on number 3 Ohio State or number 10 LSU or 9, whatever they were. This was, and no disrespect because they whooped their ass, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. And ironically, Georgia Tech seemed to have a game plan that probably should have been CU's against CU. What did Haynes King do? He ran wild. He had over 150 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground alone, was moderately productive in the passing game, but he killed CU on the ground, and Robert Livingston's defense couldn't stop a nosebleed despite forcing 3 turnovers in the first 8 minutes of the game. So the fact that your defense, if you're the Colorado Buffaloes, forces 3 turnovers in the first 8 minutes, first half of the first quarter, and you walk away with 7 total points, that is an abject disaster from an offensive standpoint, and it falls on the coaching. I have maintained, and I still maintain, you can argue with your mama, Coach Prime doesn't have to be the X's and O's guy. He can be the CEO figurehead type head coach. But that doesn't excuse the offensive ineptitude that we saw from Pat Shurmur, who he has entrusted for now 3 seasons to be the face and the figurehead behind that offense and mold it into what he wants. And it certainly doesn't excuse the clock management issues at the end of the game. So the fact that Coach Prime stepped up to the podium and doubled down on the fact that they went home with 2 timeouts in their pocket and the final minute and 7 seconds or so of the game drifted mostly off the clock in a gotta-have-it game situation was inexcusable, in my opinion. And frankly, a little bit embarrassing. When asked about it, Coach Prime said, I think we got out of bounds a couple of times, so we didn't have to take them, meaning the timeouts. And that's what happened. So we were really just trying to preserve them until we certainly needed them. I don't want to go home with timeouts. That doesn't do me no good. But you've got to be strategic as well. Just burning timeouts, just to burn them, just so you guys, meaning the media, won't say something, that doesn't make any sense at all. But I think we got out of bounds a couple of times, which preserved it for us. Let's just get one thing straight right off the bat. No, it did not. It did not preserve the clock. You had 20 to 30 seconds burned off during that period of time in the final minute or 2 of the game that could have been used to preserve clock, set up more plays, open up the playbook, and utilize all options, including the middle of the field, available to you so that you could go down and score a touchdown to keep this thing rolling. And you didn't do it. And so while I maintain in principle that the CEO type figurehead head coach can work, if you're going to be a CEO, you got to run the damn company. And the CEO for the Colorado Buffaloes last night let them down. And Pat Shurmur, as an extension of that, let the Buffaloes down because from an offensive game plan perspective, for a game that had months of ramp up to prepare for. They had no offensive identity. They brought in Kaidon Salter to be somebody and then didn't utilize his skill set. And the bevy of talent that they have at the wide receiver position, at what I think is the running back position, and even the offensive line, especially from a run blocking perspective, they couldn't do anything with it. And if you're not going to do it against Georgia Tech, win. Or are we going to go out there and feel impressed if they go out there and do it against Delaware next week? Maybe. But for me, no. The coaching staff, more than anybody up in Boulder on Friday night, let their team down. And if it continues, this program is going to start stepping backward as quickly as we thought it might step forward. The secondary issue that we have for the Colorado Buffaloes comes in the form of their quarterback dynamic and the decision that they've made. They brought in Kaidon Salter, the fifth-year transfer from Liberty, to be a veteran presence and ultimately decided him to be the starter over a coveted five-star prospect in Julian Lewis, who reclassified to jump ahead and get into the college football world a year earlier than normal, meaning he is just barely, if even barely minted at 18 years old, because I actually don't think his 18th birthday has happened yet. And clearly, Julian Lewis presents an option for the future, while Kaidon Salter in his final year of eligibility in college football represents more of the now. And thusly, I said that Kaidon Salter should be, in my opinion, the starting quarterback going into this season because he gives you the best chance to win right now. Because we're going into year 3 of the Coach Prime experience, and we have yet to win a bowl game. We have yet to play in a conference title game. We have yet to sniff a college football playoff experience. They had the runway lights on last year until that game against Kansas when Devin Neal ran them into the ground. And then it all fell apart from there. They had that drive against Kansas State that they allowed with less than a minute or so left in a game they should have won, and they gave it away right at their fingertips. And you had those moments start to stack up, and it disappeared for CU last year in the final year of Shador and Travis and several NFL caliber wide receivers. Well, you're here now. And going into this season, I maintained, because I believe that the standard and the expectation in the world of college football that we live in now, where it's the Wild West from a transfer portal perspective, it's the Wilder West from an NIL perspective and a money swapping hands perspective, over the table instead of under the table like it used to be. You have to be able to reload. Yes, you lost a Heisman Trophy winner. Yes, you lost your starting quarterback. But you know who loses NFL caliber talent every year and reloads and finds ways to bring it back? The top tier programs in college football. And you can say, well, hey, CU isn't that yet. That's fine. But they have to be working their way to get there. They have to be able to continue to reload, because Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, LSU, Notre Dame, Miami, all of those schools, even Penn State, all of them have that problem every single year, where they have upwards of 7, 8, 9, 10, 14 players drafted at key and significant positions every year, and they find a way to make it work. And you brought in Coach Prime, who's one of the higher paid coaches in college football right now. And if you're going to be that guy and pay that guy, then you as a program have to reflect that mentality. And so for all of those reasons, I said, if Kaidon Salter gives you the best chance to win right now, give him the keys and let him run. The problem is they didn't do that. Kaidon Salter was brought here, in my opinion, to be two things: a veteran presence and a leader, and an athlete at the quarterback position, specifically with his legs. Neither of those things showed up on Friday night against Georgia Tech. He did not look like a veteran. He looked rattled under the lights. He looked timid, and there was some admission to that post-game from a number of voices as well, that maybe he was a little bit afraid to tuck it and run. And almost in like a Russell Wilson-esque way, it felt like he was trying to prove that he wasn't just a runner and that he could throw the ball, because there were opportunities for Kaidon Salter, who, when you just look at him, you can kind of see the guy can make plays with his legs, but he didn't. And I think that that falls in part on him, but just as big a part on Pat Shurmur and the coaching staff for not putting him in a position to either feel like he could do those things or force the issue to have him do those things? Where were the quarterback draws? Where were the designed runs? Where was the coaching mid-game to say, hey, Kaidon, go do your thing. Let it loose and cut and run. It clearly didn't happen. And if it did happen, there wasn't any recognition or listening coming from the other end. My vote says it was the former. So if Kaidon Salter is going to be the Kaidon Salter that we saw last night, where from a game planning and stylistic perspective, it is not designed by Pat Shurmur to maximize his skill sets, especially as a runner and as an athlete, and he is not going to take that issue into his own hands to say, hey, this is what I do best, and this is how I can best move this offense forward, then there actually, in my opinion, may not be a reason to continue starting him. That they should just, if that's going to be the case, turn this thing over to Julian Lewis and let him start going through those lumps and those growing pains. Because from a pure passing perspective, Julian Lewis has the arrow pointing in his direction. He has arm talent that they clearly see as a potential future cornerstone for this franchise, but inexperience and age factor heavily into it. So don't give me this packages nonsense where we're going to throw in this guy and then have some specific packages for this guy and try to mix it and match it. Enough. Either stick with Kaidon Salter and unlock the skill set that you brought in with that vision, at least I would hope, or if Pat Shurmur is going to be Pat Shurmur and he's going to run the kind of offense that we saw this past weekend that abandoned the run game despite having success, and that tried to fit a square peg in a round hole by having a quarterback with a specific skill set that we're not going to utilize and try to go a different direction instead, then change the quarterback. Put in Julian Lewis, who can probably have a higher ceiling to run that offense better, even if it means taking some lumps in the short term. Because otherwise, what are we doing here? If they don't have an identity, then how can they make the right decision at quarterback? And if we're judging what we saw on Friday night as the identity they want to be, then maybe Julian Lewis is the better answer. They're going to have to find a better answer quickly because Coach Prime was not pleased with what he saw from the offense. When asked about their performance overall, he said that's a tough one, especially getting 3 turnovers and not coming out plentiful for that. That's not good, and we have to be more explosive, more definitive, more decisive than what we were doing with the ball on offense. And again, I totally co-sign everything that was said there. But you know what, Coach Prime? It's your damn job to make sure that that happens. If Pat Shurmur is failing, you are the one that put him in the position to fail, and therefore you are the one that has to make sure it's corrected. The CEO doesn't have to get his hands dirty and do the frontline work, but he's got to run the company. And that is not the case right now. And if it continues to be allowed, that blame only flows upstream, not downstream. We will see how they continue to manage this situation. And I don't want to sound like I'm coming across as doomsday and over the top and the sky is falling. It doesn't have to be. The Colorado Buffaloes, by many accounts, were not projected to be a Big 12 title game contender in this season, despite the fact that outside of Utah and maybe Iowa State, there aren't a ton of teams that you look at in the Big 12 and say, oh, yeah, no, that team is elite, and they're going to run this conference. Utah, I would give you the argument. Iowa State, to a lesser degree. But the Colorado Buffaloes have a chance to be as competitive as a lot of teams in that conference. They will not reach that goal, however, if they are as discombobulated and listless and, frankly, overly defensive as they were on Friday night in what was a huge, in my opinion, blown opportunity to start this season off on the right note and move forward to what I believe should be aggressive goals from a win standpoint and a contention standpoint in an expanded college football playoff format. There will be so much to continue to monitor all week as it relates to both the Buffs and the Denver Broncos, who are officially entering game week in preparation for the Tennessee Titans. It is that time of year, folks. Football season is upon us, and our Saturdays and Sundays, if our Saturdays look as good as they did this past Saturday with the slate of college football that we had, we are going to be in for a treat. And the Broncos season will officially kick off and start rolling. And we will see if Bo Nix and Sean Payton and company can build off of the lofty expectations that were sparked and emerged over the course of their 2024 campaign. So stay locked into Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan. Check out all of the amazing content at DenverSports.com. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow all of our social medias so you can get shows like The Rundown here, Denver Sports Daily, Orange and Blue Today, and the litany of other content available for your consumption 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. We will catch you tomorrow at noon for the next Rundown.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.